The severe setup is back. No balance breakdown this week. We're going ham for UFC 300 fight week. Lots of MMA action this weekend that we could talk about. Obviously, big cards in the PFL, Octagon. I think has a card coming up. It's a busy time in mixed martial arts right now. Lots going on. Cage Warriors, PFL, One, Octagon, KSW. Keeping us on our toes, but like I said, this week is mainly focused on UFC 300, a stellar card from top to bottom, a really, really truckload of great fights that we're going to talk about on today's episode. We're concentrating on the prelims. 2 days time on Thursday, we're going to hit up the main card and get everybody prepared, get everybody set up, one might say, for the big one this weekend. Seán Sheehan is with me as usual. Harry Powell is across from me, and we're going to get into it. Don't have any structure in place. Don't know what we're going to do with this, but let's tuck in. We'll start from the first prelim headliner and talk all the way down. Although Cody Garbrandt and Davison Figueiredo is a ridiculous fight to get us kicked off on, and I almost want to go from bottom to top, but we'll go from top to bottom as we always do, and we'll start off with Jiri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic in the light heavyweight division. Obviously, the light heavyweight title on the line in the main event. Rakic and Prochazka, you could argue, might be fighting for that number one contendership fight, but it's a cracking fight. I don't think we have time to talk too much about narratives, boys, or whether this is a good card or a bad card or whatever. I think we focus. I think, like I said to you before we started recording, Shawnee, I liked your your attitude in. Let's focus on the fights. Let's focus how good the fights are singularly. Let's not kind of focus on the card as a whole. Let's do it. Harry, I'm going to start with you. Jiri Prochazka, Alexander Rakic. Really interesting fight in the light heavyweight division. Rakic been on the sidelines for quite some time, coming back. Not an easy task, him coming in against Jiri Prochazka, who was a guy who was coming in the last time out from the sidelines as well. And, you know, when you come back from big surgery, a long layoff like that, did we see the true Jiri Prochazka in the last fight? I think the question to that is going to be answered on Saturday night when we see him in there against Rakic in the prelims headliner.
It feels to me as though this is the perfect kind of fight for Jiri Prochazka, in that Rakic isn't amazing anyway. He hasn't got huge power. He hasn't got incredible grappling. His striking isn't, unbelievably crisp and clean and all of these things. But he's just kind of good everywhere. And that means that for Jiri Prochazka, if and when he wants to take the fight into all the various realms, whether that's straight striking, whether that's cage wrestling, whether that's actual ground fighting specifically, Rakic is there and is available to test him and or go with him in all of those facets. I think for the UFC, this is the perfect type of matchmaking, because if Rakic goes out and beats Prochazka, well, that's ex-title holder, has only just lost to the champion, blah, 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 blah. All of these excellent storylines that they can use and push Rakic up either into that title picture immediately, or they can push him to a number one contenders, depending on, whatever they feel that he needs. I do think, though, that this is leaned far harder towards the Jiri Prochazka style, in that we've seen Rakic stopped hurt before. We've seen him get clipped a lot. We've seen him be taken down and dominated on the ground. And we have seen that sometimes his fight IQ isn't the apex part of his arsenal. And so I think for Jiri Prochazka, somebody that hits like a truck, that is very, very unorthodox, it seems like quite a safe matchup for him to go into and either build back into the Jiri Prochazka that we knew before the massive injury, or to allow him to reestablish exactly who he was to the fans on such a massive card.
And such a massive card it is, and a big opportunity as well, Shawnee, for Rakic. But you mentioned on the big podcast, and I think it's a big thing coming in here. It's Rakic and his inactivity over the last number of years as well. We've seen in the past, and I think, a Rakic that has been active on a full camp, I wouldn't be picking him against Jiri Prochazka. And I think, there's a big red flag here as well about Rakic and his style, and the fact that he's been away for so long as well, is that, all of those factors have me personally leaning towards Jiri Prochazka to probably get the win here. What way do you see in this in terms of style, and what way these lads match up, or where one or the other could get the better of each other here?
I think look, it's weird because it's a pretty simplistic matchup in terms of style. Like Harry put it very well there. You have like again, I'll steal the phrase. I think I stole it on the podcast from the co-main event. Bit of a shit-eating wild man in Prochazka. Although I think I said it about Gaethje on the podcast, but they're both the same. Against a more kind of stoic, good cardio, good jab, good technique, good technical fighter in Alexander Rakic. I think that sort of matchup usually favors the guy who is the more technically good fighter. Now, Prochazka, on the other side of it, has proven that he is exceptionally good at doing what he does and can beat very technically proficient fighters. The problem is the last time out, he didn't do that. He came in against a technically proficient fighter who isn't actually that well-rounded, and he was finished by him. Now, again, it was an early stoppage. We all remember that, but I think he's proven throughout his career that's very much a thing that he can do, even if he didn't do it the last day. But we should have some reservations because of that. I think the problem with Rakic on the other side is that it's just the timeout. Like sometimes it makes a massive difference. And like say Karl Moore was a great example, right, of a guy who is, maybe not a million miles away from Rakic in that he's a good technical fighter and, tries to do the right things. And you think for a guy like that, he comes back, he's not going to look exceptional or maybe it'll take a while to get into the fight. But Karl Moore came back, he looked great immediately, and shut us all up, kind of a thing. Will Rakic be able to do the same? I'm not so sure. This is a fight, I think, right? If both of them were coming in on 3-fight win streaks, I think it'd be an easy enough fight to predict whether it is Rakic looking extremely good and continuing to improve, or it's Prochazka just being maybe a step ahead of this sort of fighter. Whereas now I think the loss for Prochazka is a massive thing. I think the timeout for Rakic is a massive thing as well. And it's weird. I've just given you fucking 5 minutes of a breakdown to say I haven't a clue, but that's the truth. Sometimes we just don't have a clue. And I think that's the case here. I did see though that this is relatively close in the betting, and I would have thought that Prochazka, just because of what he has, I suppose, achieved over and above what Rakic has yet to achieve, I thought he would be a clear favorite, but it seems like he's not. So maybe the bookies know a little bit more than us.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it does play out as well. In terms of Harry, the way I look at it, durability, I would probably lean towards Jiri and maybe steal a phrase that you use as well, just full-on mad bastardry as well as Jiri Prochazka. And I think, it's going to be the winning and possibly losing of this fight as well. I think we know with Jiri, I think we know with his style that, he's not this master technician. He's going to throw unusual strikes. He's going to throw unorthodox shots. He's going to keep, his opponent and probably sometimes himself guessing as well of what's next. And he's a great fighter at really adjusting to, what surroundings he's faced with in fights as well. And I'm not so sure that Alexander Rakic is, we've seen him drop a decision to Volkan Ozdemir. He's been on a pretty good run, but this is quite a big kind of jump in competition. And I would say, obviously Jan Blachowicz as well has been another good fighter in the light heavyweight division. But would you consider, given all the circumstances, this being Rakic's toughest test to date and one that he's going to have to fight at his absolute best to get over?
Definitely. I mean, I think the only caveat to that is that if Jiri Prochazka has fallen off a cliff, then, maybe Rakic at his sort of apex that we've seen so far is going to be enough. But I think just to touch on the point of the style of Prochazka, I think there is a difference with other, if we were to label mad bastards, whether that's Tony Ferguson, whether that's of old, whether that's Johnny Walker of old, whether that's Sean's favorite fighter of all time, Michel Pereira of old, like whether it's these sorts of fighters. I think Jiri is actually slightly different in that Michel Pereira and Johnny Walker have a similarity in that they see a shot, they get excited about a shot, and then they throw the shot. Whether it's the right shot to throw or not, they see it, they like, yeah, I like that. And it's like they're searching on in Woolworths. Don't know if you had them in Ireland, but in the UK we had Woolworths, and they would have this fucking massive pick and mix, right? And so you'd go there with your cup and you'd fucking shove it all in, and then as you're rifling through it, you see the one that you like and you're diving in, rummaging in through that fucking thing, and they're all flying everywhere, but you get the one you want, you eat it, and you're grand. But like, I think that's a similar analogy of how Johnny Walker and or Michel Bahia used to fight. Whereas for Yuri Prochazka, there feels like there's a deep conceptual understanding of angles and footwork and space. He just doesn't apply it in the same way that somebody like Alexander Rakic would. You'd never go into a boxing gym and see the coach showing videos of Yuri Prochazka and saying, this is how you should throw a jab, or this is how you should pivot on your lead leg, or this is how you should strafe away from a right hand, right? That's never, ever, ever going to happen. But it feels to me, and I think one of the points that Shawnee highlighted, which is, or it could have been you, I forget, that's perfect, is he is so good at using the style that he has created against very technical fighters. Now, somebody like Alex Bahia, that is very, very difficult to employ when you've got an elite level super technical striker, right? So I think for Jiri,
also you got big power as well. I don't think Rakic should carry the same power as what Alex Bahia would as well. That's another key indicator for me, where I feel that this is Prochazka's fight as well. But any final thoughts, Harry, before we move on to the next one?
I think it's a Jiri flattening. That's my pick here.
Yeah, I kind of I lean on that side of things as well. Next fight, 145-pound division, Shawnee, another belter of a fight here. Aljamain Sterling, former bantamweight champ, moving up in the division. He's taken on Calvin Kattar. A good stylistic matchup for Aldo's 140 or Aljo's, I should say. Aldo is one event away. Aljo kind of coming up here, and it's a good test to see where he's at 145. When we're talking about Aljamain come in, he was always a big guy, always struggled to get down to weight. What do you think we can expect to see, Shawnee, in this one from Aljamain Sterling?
I'm very interested to see it. My first thought is that I think Aljamain is a better fighter than him and will win. You know, he went from the very top of one division to the number 8 ranked fighter in the next division. So you should think he'd be a little bit ahead, you know, even given the weight. Just it's a funny one, right? Because I just wonder, like, Aljo is a good striker, but maybe he's not wanting to get into like a technical striking matchup with a guy who's going to be a bit bigger than him and more used to the weight class. And it's now, you know, he's fought a lot of 5-round fights recently. Obviously, this is back down to 3 rounds again, and that matters. But you have to think about it as well from both sides, right? Calvin Kattar, if you look at some of his losses, Arnold Allen, Josh Emmett, Max Holloway, Zabit, Hinato Kane, all kind of bigger, kind of 155-pound guys nearly, when, you know, they say, although Holloway, obviously, this card is fighting at 155 pounds, but he's never been beaten by a guy like Aljamain. And you look at Aljamain's record and you go, okay, he lost to Sean O'Malley, he lost to Marlon Moraes, Aston Zhao, like strikers for the most part there. I think, well, he's coming in fighting a striker again now. Now, you may say he beat Perian once/twice. He beat Sandhagen, but he got Sandhagen into the ground very early in that fight. I just wonder, is there a bit to that? Like, I do think, like, you look at Aljamain, right? How's he going to win the fight? How does he win most fights? He likes taking lads to the ground and submitting them, and he's very, very good on the ground. Would it be that easy to take Calvin Kattar to the ground and submit him? He's only been submitted once in 30 fights. I don't know. So no, I probably think he will be, but I think there's a question there to be asked. I think it should be an easier matchup than what he's been fighting recently, although, you know, Cejudo didn't look amazing. TJ came in there injured. He got one DQ win, so it's all been a bit weird for Sterling. But I think Sterling is probably a better fighter than people give him the respect for. And I think the same goes for Sean O'Malley. And I think I said in the podcast as well at the weekend, I think that maybe the This is again in the bookies, it was a close enough fight. I think that's maybe down to people not respecting how good Sean O'Malley actually is. And I don't think it takes much away from someone like Aljamain to lose to someone as good as Sean O'Malley.
It's a fantastic point. It's a fantastic point. It's like, you know, people's opinion of Sean O'Malley kind of disparaged Aljamain, and the way Sean O'Malley spoke with him, and any way that Sean O'Malley's fans listen to Sean O'Malley, speak down on him, and then plus maybe some more of the hardcores who are unwilling to accept how good Sean O'Malley is. I think we're going to find out how good Aljamain Sterling is. And Harry, for Aljo, it's like, the big thing that we always said was that would he last the pace? You know, would his gas tank keep up? Because he's a very strong starter, very strong in round one, but faded away. The size isn't really, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's not something that I'm closely looking at in this fight. It's more so the clash of styles, and the style that Kattar has, which is, you know, defensive wrestling and a boxer. That's going to be a horrible style for someone like Aljo, who I feel here is going to be all the way out or all the way in. And he's going to try and either force Kattar to commit and try and get the takedown, or look to kind of swarm him, close the distance and get the takedown. I like what you said, Shawnee, about Aljo's kind of striking. He's not an offensive striker. He's more of a kind of an opportunistic striker, where he leave that jab out there, or he might throw out a 1-2 to try and get a reaction so that he can react to that reaction after that. And I think that might be a route forward for him, Harry, to get a win in this fight against Calvin Kattar.
So this fight is going to go one or two ways, right? And I'll start by just breaking down what I think, and you've just succinctly done exactly what I was going to say. I think one of the main facets of Aljo's game, as we know, is the wrestling. But the way he uses the striking, the unorthodox footwork, the way he places his head slightly on and off the center line at different points, the way he switches his stances, the way he opts to stand when he's striking, mostly is just so he can get elbows away from ribs, right? The more that he can get Calvin Kattar's elbows away from his ribs, the more space there is for him to level change and find the hips. The more that he can get those elbows away from ribs, the harder it is for Calvin Kattar to down block, right? Well, how does he get Calvin Kattar's elbows away from his ribs? One could be nice footwork. One could be he leaves a jab out there and he waits for a Calvin Kattar counter. Or we could do the thing, allow Calvin Kattar to do the thing that he loves so much, and that's volume striking, volume straight punch striking. So what we could see here, and I think one of the reasons why this matchup is so stylistically interesting, is Aljamain Sterling could say to Kattar, Grand, you come at me, you keep doing the volume striking thing, and I'm going to level change, and as soon as I level change, it's finished. Or you're going to have a really, really tough time getting back up. Or we could see Aljamain come in and say, I'm going to do some of the crazy overhand rights to try and dive on a single leg. I'm going to try and do the whatever it is, the Tasmanian devil stuff that he was doing with Piotr Jan to find the back and then eventually gets to it. For Calvin Kattar, I think the answer is relatively simple, and that's that you put your 1 or 2 fists in his face as many times as possible, and you make sure that you are forcing Aljamain to be on the back foot. A wrestler on the back foot is a much, much, much less dangerous prospect than a wrestler that's able to duck under and find you on the counter. And I just think that if Calvin Kattar can manage the range in with which he is striking in, then he will have a far, far, far easier time of finding a win against Aljamain Sterling.
Absolutely, yeah, good points there. Not too much to discuss, too much more to discuss on that, I should say. Harry, I'm going to stick with you. Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. You know, I said I didn't go and get into narratives or anything like that. Really strange placement for someone like Kayla Harrison. I feel, you know, there's a chance here, you know, to build her, even put her in an early prelims. I would have personally put her onto the pay-per-view card, to be honest. It's a huge fight for her and her career, and a huge moment for her. Obviously, look, she's still on the prelims of one of the biggest cards of the year, a historic card as well, that has to be said. But, you know, I think, you know, there was maybe a hometown main event slot there for Kayla Harrison that might make it a little bit bigger. But nonetheless, look, she's got to get over the line against Holly Holm. But before she does that, Harry, she's got to get over the line in terms of her making 135 pounds for, I believe, the first time in her career. And, you know, that itself may be more harder than the fight. As a guy, you know, who's very outspoken about weight cuts and everything like that, I feel it's kind of important that I come to you first to get your assessment on this whole situation, maybe before we even talk about the fight.
Fuck weight cutting, right? But what we should say is all that we can hope for in this specific situation is that Kayla knew that she was going to be signed, and there were talks that obviously was going to be signed, and the UFC allowed her to spend a significant amount of time in the PI, allowing the PI to run the sort of barrel of tests that they have on Kayla to ensure that she can get down to 135 pounds safely. Because the last thing that you want is on your UFC debut, you try and cut to 135 and you fail. Right? That's not the instruction that you want to the UFC. And who knows whether Holly Holm even takes that fight, and you know, we're then in bedlam and chaos and the rest of it. So I would love to think that Kayla has done everything that she possibly can in conjunction with the UFC to ensure that she can make the weight and make the weight safely. However, knowing how hard it is and how hard it was for her to make 145 pounds when we have heard from her previously, it doesn't bode well, right, for the fight itself. This is, okay, a Holly Holm who I believe is 43 years of age now, a Holly Holm who is certainly in the sort of the quicker part of the descension of her career trajectory, but still a Holly Holm who knows how to fight, knows how to stay on the outside, knows how to throw a stiff jab, knows how to throw a stiff side kick, knows how to, in her last couple of performances, has tried to show that she's still adding skill sets and she's still adding tools to her wrestling arsenal. Now, let's be honest, if it gets to a clinch exchange or an up against the fence type situation, we would all be, I think, favoring Kayla Harrison there. But it is a matchup that intrigues me on two planes. One, obviously, from a technical specific situation, in that, can she push Holly Holm against the fence? Is Holly Holm going to want to try to actually take the center of the cage, which is not something we've seen her do in a long time? Is Kayla Harrison going to be able to last 3 rounds, 3 hard rounds with somebody like Holly Holm if it does turn into that sort of fight? But then, obviously, my big consideration and my big concern going in is she going to be able to make weight and make weight safely?
I would be of the opinion at this stage, given everything that we've seen. Look, if we look at recently Chidian Chikwani and all of his difficulties, he made it safely. Looked somewhat good against Reese McKee. That's the one that we highlight. Obviously, it was probably a bit close to home to us, so we were looking at it a bit closely, Shawnee. I feel Kayla is going to make weight, but I think the big question again after that, maybe it's the two-pronged question, is how is she going to look, or how much it will take out of her performance coming in here. And I know you and I, we spoke about this in great detail on the Contender on the Patreon a while back. Has your opinion changed on this fight as opposed to what it was? And I think, you know, our main focus of attention was the weight cut on that, how it was going to affect her and how it was going to continue to affect her. You know, it's all right making weight against Holly Holm, but if she beats Holly Holm, she's going to have to make this weight again, and she's going to have to maybe make it again. And that's 3 times in 1 year. So, I mean, look, at obviously she has the blinkers on, and we should have the blinkers on too. It's all about Holly Holm on Saturday night and how she does with that test. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
You know, this is a kind of an odd one, right? But I actually, normally when you go down, let's say she's gone down 2 weight classes, but she's fought at 145 before. We're thinking more about health, and we're thinking about, Jesus, they're just cutting a lot of weight. I actually don't think that's a major issue in this one. Like, you know, she's got a lot of weight off her recently, and she, you know, we've seen pictures going around, and you know, she looks healthy. I actually don't think that's going to be the major issue. I think the major issue in this one is how she fights at that weight class. And like before, she did really use her size well, and you know, she had a lot of size. So like she had size to lose, I suppose, to get down to a couple of weight classes. But I know maybe, you know, maybe there will be a bit of an issue whenever, you know, because she had the size, maybe losing it will be an issue, and maybe having to cut that extra bit of weight as well. But I just wonder, like, can she be the same dominant judoka that she was down a couple of weight classes against someone who has, you know, fought the best of the best at that weight class for a long time? As Harry makes the point, she's older now and everything again. I think there's a lot of questions coming into it. Like, if this was at 145 pounds, I'd have no doubt in my mind whatsoever. I'd be picking Kayla Harrison here all day. And look, I'm still going to be picking Kayla Harrison, I think. But look, she did get beaten as well by Larissa Pacheco. not too long ago. She could have won that fight as well. It was a very close fight. And I think people may be forgetting that as well. But Kayla Harrison is a world level fighter. Has world-class ability. This division isn't exactly stacked. So if you're talking about her future, if she can get through this one, the future's looking very bright. You know, I saw the champion going back and forth with her today even. That's a fight that could absolutely happen.
Joey Diaz would say that was the seed. That's the seed, dog.
That's the seed. But yeah, look, there's two things here, right? And I love it. Like, we've been talking a lot, right, recently about PFL, right? And how bad PFL have been at promoting their fights. Just so awful. But if you're to look at this and promote it, right, it's a very easy fight to promote. Here's Holly Holm, who defeated Ronda Rousey, the greatest judoka we've ever seen. Here's an even better judoka coming down to do what Ronda Rousey couldn't do, and she's going to go on and she's going to be the next Ronda Rousey, the world champion and everything like that. And that isn't incorrect, you know? That is this fight in a nutshell. Can she do it? If she doesn't get inside on Holly Holm, it's going to be very difficult, right? But here's my bit of technical analysis. I know Harry's the technical expert here, but here's my little bit of it. When you look at a Holly Holm fight over the last few years, what do you see? You see Holly kind of jabbing from 20 feet, you know, throwing those big high kicks that never land or anything like that, being very, very safe. I think Kayla Harrison, and more felt Kayla Harrison maybe even more so, she's very good and very fast at closing that distance and getting inside and getting her judo to be a part of it. If she can do that, and I think she probably can, I think she'll win the fight. I think she will be too strong. I'm sure she'll put on a good bit of water and get that weight back up. Look, if she's not strong enough, maybe it could be the issue there, but I do think that's where the fight is won and lost, and that's no great. That's not anyone hasn't said before, but I think closing that distance against Holly at this age, with the speed of someone like Kayla Harrison, I think it's going to be a nightmare for Holly, to be honest.
I'm definitely leaning on that opinion, Shawnee, to be honest. But if I was to play devil's advocate and if I was to ask myself a couple of other questions, right, on Kayla Harrison, and I think her style, which has brought her some great success, could also lead to her kind of failure as well in this fight, in that, you know, she's used to being the bigger bully. She's used to bullying women inside the cage. Look, she got a little bit of pushback against Pacheco. You know, you could talk about maybe a lack of motivation, having beaten Pacheco a couple of times before might have been a factor. She's lost that fight. She accepted it. She came back. She's got that win over Aspen Ladd. You know, I beg her to ask myself the question, what happens if she does close the distance? And what happens if Holly Holm stuffs that takedown? Or what happens if Holly Holm circles away from that cage? I mean, that's where we're going to truly find out what type of a fighter Kayla Harrison is, because we talk about it all the time. And, you know, maybe you can come in and finish us off here for this one, Harry. It's all good being the nail, but how good are you when you're the hammer? That's when you really find out about it. I mean, you know, you're talking about James Sheehan this past weekend. You know what I mean? He found out a fucking couple of things about himself in that fight, I tell you. And I don't believe, even though Kayla Harrison has lost before, it was a close decision, as you said. She's never truly been the nail in a fight, and you know, it's up to the women in the UFC's 135-pound division to try and do that to her, whether they can or not. I am looking forward to seeing it. I'm excited to see that as well. And you know, I feel most of the narrative will be the weight more so than the type of fighter Kayla Harrison is. But if you're a great fighter, you always find a way. Harry, finish us off in your thoughts on this one.
Look, I think I agree with you that what we're looking at here is still a fighter that we don't know Kayla's level truly, right? Because the PFL, as Shawnee said, not fantastic matchmaking, not fantastic promotion, but what we are staring down the barrel of is a 135-pound division, which, okay, isn't amazing in the UFC either. It's seen better days, but it's still a good division with good fighters. As always, we want to see specific questions asked of fighters. One of them for Kayla Harrison is what happens when she can't get the takedown. What happens when she can't slice through people's guards and find arm bars and these sorts of things. In this specific fight, I just don't think Holly Holm's going to be the person that asks that question. I think the UFC knows exactly what they're doing here in this fight. One, Holly is more willing to grapple than she ever has been. Shawnee's absolutely right that, you know, when she's throwing shots, it's like she's trying to find a javelin. You know, she's fucking 20 feet away, and the strikes just don't look anywhere near as dangerous as they did 5 years ago. And I agree that the athleticism of Kayla Harrison is a massive, massive factor here. Is this going to be the stiffest test of her UFC career? No, I don't think it is. Absolutely not. But I think the UFC have made the right matchup in that if she goes in, the storyline is easy for the UFC to sell if she beats Holly Holm. And frankly, if Holly Holm beats Kayla Harrison, you know what the storyline's going to be as well. You know what I mean? What, 2 Ronda Rouseys aren't good enough? Holly Holm's still here. Rah. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I think this is I'll be picking Kayla Harrison in this fight too.
Yeah, I think I will be too. And I think it's a very smart matchup by the UFC in terms of, you know, if Kayla does get the win, it will be a legit win. But Holly Holm has been defending people wanting to take her down for her entire career. And, you know, she's going to have to do it one more time here if she's going to get the better of Kayla Harrison. And I think if she does, it's going to be very interesting because I don't rate Kayla Harrison on the feet whatsoever. And yeah, that's an exciting one. In the mid prelims, you would have it probably early days on ESPN or TNT, wherever we're going to be watching that. As we move on, Shawnee, another banger in the 145-pound division, Sodiq Yusuff versus Diego Lopes. Yusuff coming off, obviously, a loss over Edson Barbosa by unanimous decision. Diego Lopes has bounced back from his UFC debut on short notice with Movsar Evelev, obviously with 2 great wins over Gavin Tucker and Pat Sabatini. You know, it's a good test for Yusuff kind of to try and get him back into the rankings and get him in more ranked opponents possibly going forward. But it's also a good opportunity for Lopes to come in and also just seeing your message now, Shawnee. Seeing your message. Too late for that one, son. For Lopes coming in here to kind of take all the hard work that Yusuff has created for himself in the rankings as well. Your quick thoughts on this one?
I haven't seen it with Lopes yet, to be honest. I know a lot of people are blowing him up about being, you know, he's going to be the next best thing. I haven't seen it. I never saw it with Yusuff, to be honest. And I know I said it on the podcast there at the weekend. I'm going to be nothing but positive about this card, and I feel everything else. I like this will probably be a good fight. The one thing about Yusuff, right? It feels like he's holding back a little bit. It feels like he's like, and I've said it about fighters before that they could be a great fighter in time. I think that's his biggest issue, and I really like Pat Sabatini, and he knocked him out early, so maybe that was the turning point. But yeah, Lopes knocked him out. But for Yusuff, I don't know. When you get in there with Edson Barboza, you lose to Arnold Allen. When you're coming to that level, it's tough. Yeah,
that's kind of my assessment on this as well. Sorry, go ahead.
I hope this is a good fight and I can enjoy it.
I think Diego Lopes is in it, so I think honestly and truly it's going to be a good fight because of that. And I agree with what you're saying in that I feel Sodiq Yusuff is too one-dimensional, and when that one dimension doesn't work for him, he doesn't really have anything else. And I think we've seen Diego Lopes a little bit, you know, in all areas. We've seen him knocking out guys. We've seen him match Evelev in the grappling and stuff like that. Remember, he took that Evelev fight on 5-6 days notice, I believe, and went to a decision with him. So that was like, okay, this guy has something about him. So then what the UFC have done, and Harry and I have talked about this week after week, in that, you know, you go in at short notice against a high level opponent, you're faced with lower level opposition, kind of mid-range opposition. And now I think with this fight, Harry, with Yusuff, we're really going to find out what type of fighter that Lopes is and how good or bad he is, or if he can make a march up the 145-pound division.
So let's start with fuck Lloyd Irvin, right? We'll start there.
Yeah, always.
Secondarily, I think I will slightly disagree with your assessment on Sodiq Yusuff. And what I'll say is Sodiq Yusuff is 145-pound Alexander Rakic, where he's got a little bit of power, he can strike a little bit, and he's fine everywhere, right?
What variety have we ever seen in fights with him, Harry?
Exactly. He can just do a little bit of everything.
You know what he's going to do? He's going to come out slow, and he's going to paw out the jab, and he's going to look for an excuse to get Lopes up against the cage, and he's going to try and control him and use his strength against the cage and land a couple of fucking knees and land a couple of rabbit punches. And that's why probably Shawnee is worried about how bad this fight is going to be.
No, I'm really surprised how on board with me you are on this.
No, it's unusual. Sorry, Harry. Try talk us around.
I just think I agree with you entirely that Diego Lopes is just not going to allow that sort of stuff. Clearly, there is a guy in there who has wicked power. He's got a wicked chin, and he has this tenacity where he refuses to be in stale situations. He is constantly working, whether he's on the back foot, whether he's on the front foot, whether he's moving laterally, and especially when he's on the ground. I mean, a lot was made of the Movsarov-Loyev fight, and I think we should not downplay the Movsarov-Loyev fight. But what we saw is a man that didn't play guard conventionally. We were watching Cage Warriors last week, and a couple of fellas there were locking up closed guard, and they were trying to play closed guard, whether it was elbows from the top or whatever. Diego Lopes is looking to make wrist grips, pull people in, slam elbows, slam up kicks, slam knees, search for submissions at the same time. It takes a really, really good understanding of how all of those facets meld together in order to produce the sort of performance from the bottom as he did against Movsarov-Loyev. Now, okay, he loses that.
If I could be devil's advocate there too, you don't want to really rest on your laurels doing that, because at the end of the day, even though it was impressive, it still didn't work.
It didn't work for him in the fight, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think what it does is it dissuades specific types of fighters.
Yeah. Lay and pray kind of style. It was,
exactly. And I think that's more akin to a Pat Sabatini. That's more akin to a Sadiq Yusuff, and far less akin to a Movsarov-Loyev. I feel like what we're going to see in this specific fight is Sadiq Yusuff forced to make some decisions. Is he going to actually try and put Diego Lopes away? Because that's how you fight Diego Lopes. You have to consistently overwhelm him on the feet and on the ground. And Diego Lopes is just going out there to make somebody look like James Sheehan's face by the end of the fourth round in their fight. And so I think it will be a good fight. I think it will be an entertaining fight. And I am picking Diego Lopes for this one also. I just think he's better all round.
I think so too, and I think it's going to be a good fight because Diego Lopes will make it a good fight. Another good fight, Shawnee, we'll go to you for this one. Jalen Turner versus Renato Money Moicano. I want my money in the lightweight division. This could be another mad fight as well. I'm going to go straight in from the hip here. I think Jalen Turner actually trucks Moicano in this one, to be honest. What do you think?
I agree. Do you know what? I was never as disappointed with a fighter as I was with fucking Moicano. 2 fights ago, he comes out, money Moicano, I want money, I want to be the most exciting fighter. And he puts on the biggest bore fest of a fucking sloppy, just draw Drew Dober to the ground, the most boring fighter. I hope Jalen Turner comes out here and fucking turns him upside down. I have a lot of time for Jalen Turner. I really like him. He lost to Dan Hooker though, so he's probably not that good. It's a different one to call, because like Turner has lost to Garbrandt, he's lost to Frivola, he has been taken down in fights. He's not the most well-rounded guy in the world. Again, you look at the age, and he's 28 years of age, and you think now or never for Jalen Turner. You need to be hitting that phase of your career where I'm going to stop people doing what they do to me. Now, he went out there with Bobby Green, a very favorable matchup. Bobby Green at probably the best part of his career, but he's not. You know what? He's just not a great fighter. Moicano probably a little bit better than a Bobby Green. You just look for Turner. He's one of those guys. You see a little bit like you mentioned Reese McKee, or a little bit like Fabian Edwards. If they can get the hands going, if they can start landing those shots, they're very good, really good. And if he can do that, I agree with you. I think he can take him apart. But if he doesn't, Moicano is, Moicano sells wolf tickets. Like Moicano, he's not money. He's not money. He's not money.
Monopoly money, Moicano. Fake.
I came up with a good nickname for him the last time, but I can't remember it now. But yeah, fake news Moicano.
Yeah, indeed. I think to look into it and maybe set you up a little bit for the technical analysis, Harry, when we're looking at Jalen Turner, what he's going to be faced with here is, in my opinion, a similar enough battle that he would have faced against Mateusz Gamrot, in terms of, Gamrot, all right striker, but will want to close the distance, will want to put him on his back. And I think Jalen Turner, in what was a really close fight, and a lot of people would argue that Jalen Turner did win that fight against Gamrot. I feel he's going to be dealt with the same problem here. And I feel that he's going to be bigger and stronger and more powerful than Moicano to kind of dictate where this fight is. And that will be, obviously, he'll want it to be on the feet. And I think the longer it stays on the feet, the better chance we have of seeing him going out there and knocking out Moicano, in my opinion. Is that the way you kind of see it?
So my analysis of Jalen Turner is that him fighting somebody that wants to grapple with him is actually in his benefit. And the reason why I give that analysis is because Jalen Turner has an incredible reach for 155 pounds. And when he's fighting fighters that specifically just want to strike with him, he allows himself to crowd. He allows himself to get caught up in his hands. He allows himself not to fight at the range with which he actually can. Whereas when he is fighting somebody that is more grapple heavy, somebody like a Gamrot, whatever, where he has to be really disciplined in his range awareness, he fights far, far, far more clinically. In the Dan Hooker fight, you see him just getting caught up in the wrong sorts of situations because he knows Dan Hooker's not going to shoot, right? He knows Dan Hooker's not going to change any levels. But in the Gamrot fight, you notice how he is constantly circling, constantly checking his footwork, constantly checking his center line, and then looking to land his shots. And so I feel that Jalen Turner is far better on the feet than Moicano. And I think Moicano telegraphs some of his shots quite a lot. If you're Drew Dober and you're just swinging kitchen sinks at fellas, it's easy enough to notice when that's coming and level change and come underneath it. Jalen Turner's a far more mature striker than a Drew Dober. And I have a sneaky feeling that Jalen Turner's going to find a knee as Moicano starts to level change, and that it's going to go pretty fucking terribly from there. But yeah, I like Jalen Turner a lot in this fight.
Yeah, 100%. He lands one of those knees, he could get one of those proposed 300,000 performance of the night bonus that Justin Gaethje was looking for. I'd say, Justin, you can divide that by 10 and probably divide it by 10 again, and you might get somewhere close to what you get for performance of the night. UFC ain't shelling out jack shit for bonuses here. Look, we were talking about negativity here, lads, and everything like that. I have to admit, I'll save a small bit of negativity for this next fight, if I'm being honest. Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. It's a hard one to get up for, but we have to. We can't complain too much. Shall we give it the arm of death? Any quick thoughts on it?
I'm just stealing Harry's thing there.
Yeah. Let's go. The arm of death has been handed over. Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. If I was to give him a little bit of something, it's a not in fight. Like Jessica Andrade, make up your mind, love. Are you either fighting at 115 or are you fighting at 125? Because, she
There's
doesn't really know.
women doing that now, doesn't there? I keep getting confused between your Amanda Limases and your Amanda Hebases, and fucking, they're all just floating around between divisions. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, I thought this was at 125 literally until I saw it, but look at how's it never. We shall move on. And let's talk about Jim fucking Miller. I had to call him that because that's the big news coming into this fight. Will Bruce Buffer? I find it funny that people maintain and stay asking this question when a clear answer to this question was already given out, that this fight is going to be aired live on ESPN, and they can't say fucking on ESPN. So it was dead and buried, but they still seem insistent that this is going to happen. But nonetheless, no matter what happens, Harry, and how he's announced, it's great to see Jim Miller create history on this card, number one. And I think it's a good, exciting matchup against a good character for him to possibly go out there and grab a win.
I pray that he wins, and I pray that he retires at the same time, just because what a beautiful way to end it. Like a beautiful, beautiful serendipitous way for you to walk in, biggest card. I really hope they put together a little package for him. I really hope that even the broadcast team will just give him a couple of minutes of spiel about his career and where he's got to and the Lyme disease and everything else. And then he gets to be able to walk out, do the fight, beat Bobby Green, lay the gloves down. And that would be the beautifulest story in the world. Now, Bobby Green, He can crack a bit. He's an orthodox. He talks a lot. But it feels to me as though, you know, Jim Miller has been fighting the new starters and then the old waves and the new starters again. And I don't know. I feel like Jim Miller's got far more tools. And if this is the last one, then you always see like a really tough, gritty, grimy performance from those sorts of guys. Dangerous on the guillotine, dangerous right hand, really, really good grappling, really, really good rear naked chokes, really good back attacks. It feels as though if he can sort of sway away from Bobby Green's sort of brawl and shot style, big shots leaning in, and he can work his way to either establishing his jab and forcing Bobby Green to second guess those blitzes in, or if he can force some grappling exchanges and look to take Bobby Green down, then he can certainly have lots of success in this fight.
Yeah, indeed. It's going to be very interesting to see. Like, and I think, look, with Jim Miller, he's one of these guys who, you know, never maybe reached the heights that he would have liked to have reached, but he's forged for himself, Shawnee, a fantastic career, you know, through many, many years, through lots of events, and, you know, through disease, through everything like that. And, you know, whilst we get caught up on champions and elite level quality here, what we have in Jim Miller, I think, is just a fucking fantastic representative for mixed martial arts. The way he talks, the way he carries himself, the way he speaks about other fighters, and the way he goes out there and kind of defies the fight game by still going out there at this late stage of his career when he's 40 and going on an active win streak, which has kind of led him into this opportunity at UFC 300 against Bobby Green.
Says it all. I think that he was the first ever entrant into the SevereMMA Fair Play Award Hall of Fame. So
big honor right there.
Big honor. I think that's it. Like, fair play to him. He's had a great career, you know. Absolutely fair play to him. Do you know one issue I see with this fight? It's 15 years since Bobby Green has been submitted in an MMA fight. And that's no coincidence, I don't think. Is Miller going to be able to get him down and submit him? You know, that's tough. It's tough. I think Bobby Green's going to win this fight, unfortunately, and I don't like saying unfortunately because I don't mind Bobby
Cooper, Buzz Killington, Sheehan over here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I think it's going to stay on the feet. I think he's going to probably have a little bit too much for him, and I think he'll probably knock Jim Miller out, unfortunately.
That's a classic case of not letting the heart rule over the head. I can't disagree with you too much, Shawnee, when you think of it as well. It's something that I have had difficulty in doing, that I'm trying to get better at, is having more of
being a ruthless bastard like me.
Yeah, just having a non-emotional approach to what you want to see in comparison to what's actually going to happen. So Harry is going on. He doesn't want the arm of death is swaying on this conversation, but I can guarantee you there ain't going to be any arm of death about this next fight as well. And you know what? There's been a lot of talk, lads, about Dana White and what he has said about this card of being the greatest card of all time. And, you know, somewhat is kind of taken away from the card a little bit from the fact that he said that. But he did say one thing in the lead up to this. And he said, you're going to look at the first fight on the UFC 300 card and you're going to say, how the fuck is this the first fight on the card? And well done. They've managed to do that with Dawson Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt. And I can't remember who I'm leading in here. Maybe I've mentioned somebody already, but I'll open up the floor. This is a fantastic fight. Got to see Cody Garbrandt at 189 going in there, picked up an unbelievable knockout win. Looked good against Brian Kelleher, but like I said, it was Brian Kelleher. I think you're talking about a different kettle of fish here. Former flyweight champion Dawson Figueiredo. Shawnee, I'll bring you in first for your thoughts on the fight.
Do you know why I love this fight? And I have a specific reason why overall I think it'll be a good fight, but I have a specific reason. I used to love Dawson Figueiredo, right? Before, when he became champion, that Joseph Benavidez, a couple of fights, Alex Perez fight, he just laid down a gauntlet and fucked you up and then submitted you. I love that. The Brandon Moreno fight changed him. He had to become a different fighter. You could argue, you say he became a more well-rounded fighter, but I think it's actually taken a little bit away from him. The Rob Font fight, he came back and he won, but still he didn't look himself. This fight is a fight he needs to do that in. Like, you're fighting Cody Garbrandt, with all due respect to Cody, not the best chin in the world. The best way to fight Cody is to get him into a war. Figueiredo is brilliant at getting into war. Now, you could arguably say the best way to fight Figueiredo is getting him into a war too and testing his chin. But I don't know. I wouldn't really sign up to that necessarily. I love Figueiredo on those sort of fights, and I think it's the best way for him to fight here. And I think if he does it once and it's successful for him, we could see that really exciting Figueiredo go on and fight future people like that. And that's what I'm very excited about. Is that I'm not just hoping it'll happen. I actually do think it'll happen as well. So that's why I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I think like in terms of war, you can have a couple of different style of wars. Obviously, the war on the feet, but the wars that Moreno and Figueiredo have had were mixture of stand-up exchanges, wild scrambled exchanges, and I think where both Figueiredo and Moreno both flourished was in what you said, in the same area, is that creating that mad scramble, but then creating something off of that scramble where you're exiting with an elbow, you're exiting with a knee, you're exiting with a combination. And I think Figueiredo kind of did have to change that up in the Moreno fights, because Moreno was getting the better of them, where he kind of had to cull back his style a little bit, where it did showcase that he was the better technical savvy fighter. Even that wasn't enough for him to get over the line against Moreno. Unfortunately, we've seen that kind of technical side of things in Deiveson Figueiredo, Harry, in his move up to 135. But are you on the lines that he needs to keep that technical savvy, or do you think we should see him release a little bit of, as you say, mad bastardry in this one against Cody Garbrandt?
I think he beats Cody Garbrandt irrespective of which style he chooses to fight in, frankly. I think Deiveson, even if he fights technically, he hits really hard, and Cody just can't take shots anymore. I think if he chooses to grapple, I think he's a better grappler than Cody. And I do think that Deiveson at a higher weight class, he has far more of an ability in terms of being able to go and push. And okay, we didn't see it in vast swaths against Rob Font, but he looked fine against Rob Font, right? He looked good, won the fight. I just I don't like this fight for Cody Garbrandt. Now, don't get me wrong, I may have cursed that and Cody's going to go out and look fantastic and put Deiveson Figueiredo away, but I just can't see it. I feel like Deiveson comes out, and whether he chooses to fight technically, whether he chooses to look to grapple, whether he chooses to draw Cody into a war, I feel like Deiveson Figueiredo wins. And I also think the UFC know what they're doing again. You know what I mean? Like, Cody Garbrandt still has a name. He still has a name in that people know who he is. They know his face. They know what he looks like, etc., etc. And you can build up all the sort of packages that you want, the highlight reel packages that you want to sell the fight. Rob Font is a good win. We know what Rob Font is. We know who he is. We know what he is in the division. And so I feel like the UFC have put this fight together to, again, just shoot Deiveson Figueiredo a little higher in that 135-pound division.
Indeed, I think the UFC definitely know what they're doing. I think Deiveson Figueiredo knows what he's doing as well. He's been calling out Cody Garbrandt. Garbrandt has been calling out Deiveson Figueiredo too, but sometimes it's be careful what you wish for in mixed martial arts. And I'll tell you something for nothing. If there was ever a first fight to tune into on a UFC card, this is it. Cracker of a fight, belter to get us going on UFC 300. That's been the prelims roundup. We'll be back in a couple of days. Stay tuned to SevereMMA for the main card breakdown as well with the three of us. We'll chat to you all soon.